Fellas, it's it's been a minute. I took a few days to just kind of get away from YouTube, get away from the content stuff for a little while, just because I needed it. I needed a little bit of a break, and I think doing stuff like that is more important now than ever with everything going on in the world. And the other reason that I wanted to take a break was because this week in the NBA, really the next 2 weeks, is going to be out of control. We have a 4-day span in which teams are now allowed to make trades, and then we have the draft, and then we have free agency. And as a result, I feel like I have to do my, obligatory free agency / off-season predictions video. And that's what this video is going to be today. I'm going to be talking about what I think is going to be happening in the NBA over the next week. And fair warning, this is not going to be as precise of a predictions video as I've done in the past, because in the past it's been things like, LeBron is going to go to the Lakers, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are going to go to the Nets. And when you're dealing with so much uncertainty in terms of rumors and things like that, but also not as many huge name players like those guys, it's a little bit more difficult to predict just because there's not as much concrete info out there. But I'm going to do my best anyway. Really quickly though, before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every day now through the rest of the NBA offseason. And like I said, it's going to be a crazy offseason. So if you're looking for a place for consistent NBA content, this is a great place to be. You can also leave a like rating on the video. It lets me know that you're enjoying the content, and it helps get it out to more people on YouTube as well. You can also hang out with me at various socials at the bottom of the screen, including Twitch, where I will be streaming later on tonight, Eastern time. Once some football stuff is over, I gotta watch my Panthers play. Later tonight, I will be streaming if you guys want to come hang out, because I've taken a few days away from that as well. You can also hang out with me at the various socials at the bottom of the screen outside of Twitch, like Twitter and Discord. And with all those things said, let's get to the predictions. Okay, so I feel like there's a lot of teams that continue to be talked about as we go into the offseason, and that's kind of where this first prediction, quote unquote, falls. And for me, those two teams are the Philadelphia 76ers and the Houston Rockets. And this isn't, again, all that precise of a prediction. At the end of the video, I'll talk about specific players and what I think could happen to them and where I think they could be going. But when we're talking specifically about the Rockets and the Sixers, I think they're going to do something. And I know that's not the most exciting prediction in the world, but that's about as far as I'm comfortable going as it relates to a prediction, because as you're looking at these two rosters, there certainly need to be some changes made. In Philadelphia, we've known this for a while, that they just don't have a group that fits well together, whether that's an Embiid Simmons thing or a roster-wide thing. I think you would be correct in both areas pointing that out there. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is an Al Horford trade, if there's a Josh Richardson trade, if there's a Tobias Harris trade. I would put those three guys as the most likely to be moved, and then way down to the bottom, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. Even with Daryl Morey now in Philadelphia, I think that the likelihood of a massive shakeup on that roster is pretty low, but those three guys, I would imagine they'll at least look at moving or maybe potentially making some moves in the draft. And then Houston is a team that is really the only rumor that I missed out on over the last couple of days in terms of a significant one. And that's this rumor that Russell Westbrook essentially wants to be out of Houston. Again, we'll talk about him specifically later, but for Houston, I kind of feel like they have to do something at this point. I was always kind of under the impression that they were going to stand pat. They were going to, just run it back next year and hope for the best. But this owner that they have now seems to be willing to change things up just for the sake of changing things up, or potentially just to make it a cheaper team, seeing as how it doesn't look like they're going to be championship contenders. So those are two teams to watch in terms of just simply doing something over the next week and a half to 2 weeks. Now, the next prediction here is, again, kind of a general one, but speaks to what I think is going to be probably the craziest part of the next week, and that is the NBA draft. And my prediction is that there is going to be tons and tons of movement within this draft, potentially the most draft day and draft specific trades that we've ever seen in NBA history. Whether that be a team moving up to the first or the second pick, I think both of those are certainly in play. You could even extend that as well to 3 and 4. Teams like Charlotte, teams like Chicago could potentially move up or down in this draft. Then as you look back at a team like the Boston Celtics that has those 3 first-round picks, that, as I continue to say, I would be shocked if they make a selection with all 3 of those. Those could be picks used in a potential Jrue Holiday trade, which we'll talk about later, or just to move up into the top 10 potentially with a team like Detroit. But no matter what, the best prediction I can give about this draft, and the second video of the day later today is going to be about the draft and all the rumors that have been swirling around it. The best prediction that I can give is just expect the unexpected and expect a ton of craziness and a ton of trades, which is certainly awesome for me and is great for content. So I'm looking forward to that one. As we kind of compare that now to free agency and we go to the next prediction, For me, I think that free agency in terms of the signings themselves, in terms of a player going here, a player going there, is going to be certainly quieter than it was last year, especially, when you're comparing it to some of the big names that were moved last offseason. However, I would look out for a significant amount of sign and trades for two reasons. One, there aren't a ton of teams that have a significant, like $20+ million worth of cap space, and I think that's only like 4 or 5 teams if you take away the Pelicans after they re-sign Brandon Ingram. And that is obviously going to limit teams' ability to bring in free agents that they would potentially want. And the second part of this is arguably the most significant move of the entire offseason. Last offseason was a sign and trade involving a team that didn't have cap space to bring this player in the first place, and it was Jimmy Butler. The Heat traded Josh Richardson for Jimmy Butler. They weren't able to sign him outright, but they were able to make a sign and trade work, and they ended up making the finals, and Jimmy Butler was awesome for them. And so other teams might look at that and think, hey, this is an option that we can explore as well. There was another huge sign and trade last offseason as well involving D'Angelo Russell and Kevin Durant. And I think specifically in an offseason in which cap space is more limited than it was last offseason, we could see more sign and trades as it relates to Gordon Hayward, as it relates to Danilo Gallinari, a handful of guys around the league, Montrezl Harrell. I would be on the lookout for those types of deals more so than like any kind of huge free agency signing, simply because those huge free agents aren't out there. And even if they were, the cap space just isn't there for a lot of these teams, especially now with the lower than projected salary cap number by about $10 million that we now have for this offseason. So another thing to keep an eye out there for is those sign and trades. Now we get to, talking about the big name guys, right? And like where I expect them to go. Do I expect them to be traded? Let's just go ahead and go down the list. So the first one is a guy that already has his own video, but we'll talk about him a little bit more here. And it's Jrue Holiday. I do think that Jrue Holiday is going to get moved, but where specifically is really difficult for me to find out here, because I think that there are a couple of players, and Jrue Holiday is one of them, that it's pretty clear that this is kind of the last significant chance to trade a player like this while also limiting your risk. Now, you could certainly wait until the trade deadline to move Jrue Holiday, but injuries could happen, or maybe just teams don't have the same kind of need for Holiday that they originally thought. I just think there's more risk involved in waiting in this particular situation, given the quick turnaround for the start of next season for some teams. And just the weirdness of the start of next season, I personally would rather move on from a guy that I already think I'm going to trade this offseason rather than waiting until the trade deadline. And I think Jrue Holiday is a perfect example of that. Now, in terms of specific destinations, my best guess would be somewhere like Boston or Dallas, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's some other team that I'm not even thinking about in this moment. I think the Pelicans recognize that they've got a longer term view here than Jrue Holiday being around for one more year, because he can be a free agent next offseason. Getting some assets out of him, moving him on to a team like Boston or Dallas that think of themselves as contenders for next year, I think would be a good move. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now, is that Jrue Holiday is going to be traded within the next week and a half to 2 weeks. Next up is the big one that we talked about a little bit earlier, and it's Russell Westbrook. And I can't get a beat on this situation at all. I really can't. The more I look into it, the more that I think about it, I really can't figure it out. For me, the best I can say is it's a coin flip on whether or not Russell Westbrook gets traded. If James Harden gets traded, then it's obviously incredibly more likely that Westbrook would then also be moved so they can completely break this thing down. If he did get moved, though, individually outside of a Harden situation, it feels like it kind of has to be a team like the Knicks or a team like the Pistons, a team that wants to generate interest in their team. Obviously, the Knicks are in a better spot than the Pistons are, but the Pistons, in terms of ticket revenue, in terms of everything, ticket revenue for every team is non-existent at the moment. But in terms of fan interest, it's probably the lowest in Detroit, and they don't have really assets to look forward to either. So Westbrook there with the salary cap space they do have to take on that contract would make a bit of sense. Maybe Houston could get something back, and then New York is always going to be rumored for guys like Westbrook and Paul that have those huge contracts. But in terms of is he going to get moved, it's 50-50 for me right now for Russell Westbrook. Another big move, a guy I just mentioned here, is Chris Paul, and I kind of put Chris Paul in the Jrue Holiday category of why not just go ahead and move him now? What's the benefit of waiting until the trade deadline when you're dealing with someone that I think has a significant amount of risk? Like him and Holiday have a good amount of injury issues in their past, and Paul, of course, is getting older and older and is coming off of an incredible season given his age. I don't see how his value will be higher than it is right now. And for Oklahoma City, I think it makes a ton of sense for them to go ahead and move on from him. So I do think that he's going to be moved within the next week and a half to 2 weeks, but specifically where is anyone's guess. We've seen Phoenix rumors, we've seen all kinds of different things. And I personally cannot definitively say this guy is going to go one way or another, but I do think that he is going to get moved here within the next, like I said, week and a half to 2 weeks. And then a couple quick ones right here at the end. James Harden, I don't think is going to be moved. I think it's just too difficult to logistically make anything happen there. And I don't know where the upside is for Houston in terms of moving on from James Harden right now. Ditto for Paul George. I know that people were frustrated about how everything went down with the Clippers at the end of last year, but I don't think that's going to translate to a Paul George trade so quickly. I think he stays, and same thing for Victor Oladipo as well. I don't anticipate Victor Oladipo going anywhere. He has reiterated twice now publicly that he is committed to Indiana and he wants to stay with the Pacers, and I think that they will honor that. And if they do make some moves, it'll be outside of Oladipo rather than trading him himself. But regardless, I'm excited. This is going to be a crazy, crazy week. To my knowledge, teams can officially make trades tomorrow. And then we've got the draft on Wednesday, free agency on, I want to say Friday, maybe over the weekend will be when free agency starts. I think it's Friday. And then we just roll from there. It's going to be super, super fun. This is my favorite part of the year, and I'm glad to have you guys here along with me. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.